Hello there. What's going on, everybody? Today we're going to be taking a look at the Liberator. What is the Liberator? Well, it's the new title that comes for your CR-90 Corvettes that you can equip from Rebellion in the Rim, which is launching very soon. We'll have it before the end of the month, so stay tuned for the launch of Rebellion in the Rim, and then everybody can play with all these very cool new cards, so that's going to be very exciting. So, Liberator is going to be a fun title that adds Fleet Command to a CR-90, which the Rebels kind of only had before on the Pelta, so now you don't necessarily have to run a Pelta. Or if you want to potentially run multiple fleet commands, you can run a Pelta and a Liberator. Or if you've got multiple Peltas, just do that instead also. But the Pelta's not really that mobile, so maybe you want something that's got a little more oomph, a little bit more to cite the technical term. Pretty cool title here. We're going to talk about the nuances of how you can use it and some different ways that it can affect your builds. So, let me also remind you guys, there's still time left to enter the big giveaway. If you would like to win one of these sets of promos, you can win either a wedge for X-Wing, you can win MC-80 and leading shots for Armada. There are 3 people are going to win that, and if you want extra chances to win, there's also more chances on Patreon. But generally, to win one of the top first 4, all you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. I'll be announcing the winner this weekend. I typically announce winners towards the end of my videos, so make sure you stay tuned for that. So, the Liberator. Now, this was ended up being their command ship after they lost the Pelta from Star Wars Rebels, and it gives you an additional fleet command icon on your upgrade bar. You cannot equip this if you have a fleet command icon in your upgrade bar. It's funny, you're like, an additional? Wait, is this assuming that you could have one already? No. They're just using the word additional now for anything that's adding something. So keep that in mind. Additional doesn't mean they're expecting you to have one already. So you're going to basically gain fleet command, and it's only a 2-point title, so that's pretty cool. But it also says you cannot spend a command token to resolve a fleet command card's effect. So what does that mean? Because, well, there's really 2 things you do with fleet commands, right? You can either feed them by spending a token at the beginning of a round, or you can spend them by flipping them over and say, all right, it's going to work this turn, but now it's gone. So basically, Liberator is a one-shot fleet command that's going to buff your whole fleet one time, and then it's gone. Which 2 points is actually kind of appropriate for, considering you're only going to get 1 turns of use out of it. And a lot of times we see in games like Armada where a single use effect is much cheaper than a permanent effect. But now, of course, you are still going to have to pay for the fleet command as well. So that's another reason that this title is so cheap, because, well, it's only 2 points, but you're also going to have to pay however much the fleet command that you want to run works. Now, it also is nice because we are getting a new fleet command in Rebellion in the Rim too, and I'm going to talk about that once we get to it. So, what are some ways you're going to want to maybe consider running this? Well, I'll kind of run through them all. So first off, you have All Fighters Follow Me. This one is one of the cheaper side. It's only 5 points, and this one is going to eventually effectively increase the speed of your fighters. This one is not a bad idea if you are running slow fighters that want to engage. I like this one for stuff like maybe the YT-1300. If you're running a couple of generic YT-1300s that want to be able to stay with the rest of your fleet and also engage and then trigger their escort and their counter and use all that hull and stay alive, that maybe you just want them to engage the one time, and then once they're caught up, that's fine. Maybe not necessarily the best for bomber-specific fleets that might have to chase around the ships, but possibly. It kind of depends on the case-by-case way that it may work out. You may find yourself in a lot of situations where, like, all right, I'm running B-Wings there, but once they get in front of a Star Destroyer, they can kind of just camp out. If they get bumped, I push them back to the front. They're always going to have that shot. But then again, if you're trying to chase fast ships, you're going to have a much harder time, and you might want this every turn. But this is not a bad option. The problem with this one is those squadrons still have to be activated by a ship, so you still have to run a carrier-friendly fleet. So it's a little bit less versatile to do a one shot with just this. Now for Entrapment formation, this one is generally good almost all the time. He's giving you the ability to change your speed. This is effectively giving you Ozzel's ability. And I like Entrapment formation, but I don't know about it just a one-off. It's also if you do pop this, because you're gonna have to pop, you're not gonna be able to just do it every turn. If you do pop this, your opponent's gonna be expecting you to be moving a little bit more, so it's gonna kind of, maybe telegraph your intentions for that turn before you've moved. They'll be like, oh, you're planning on speeding up, otherwise you wouldn't have used it this turn. So not sure if this is the best use for this one, especially since we have a better navigation based one coming. Shields to maximum, which initially was my favorite fleet command, I've come to realize I'm not that big of a fan of. There are ways to really make it great, but the big problem with shields to maximum is, first off, it's 1 point more. It's a 6 point instead of a 5 point. And generally, people don't spread damage out amongst all of the different ships. Also, you have to activate the ship to recover a shield. So, I mean, granted, recovering a shield on every ship in your fleet is great. But how much value are you really going to get out of this? Because your opponents are generally going to focus down one ship at a time. And so most times when I have tried to run shields to maximum, I usually only have one ship that's damaged. And it's usually damaged, moderate to heavily at least, and because my opponent's focusing fire on the ship that it wants to bring down. It doesn't really do you a whole lot of good in a game that's only 6 turns long to try to spread out fire and do a little bit to everything. Games where I'm forced to do that is a problem, because then we end turn 6 and every ship is still alive, but maybe only has 1 or 2 health left, but they're all still alive, and it only works with super star destroyers, so where half points matters. So the shields to maximum I don't see as being super great for a one-off. Take evasive action is a kind of a nice one. It's another 6.1, so it's a little bit more expensive. This is at the start of the ship phase. You can discard this card or spend a token. Of course, in this case, you wouldn't be able to spend the token, so you'd have to discard the card. And if you do until the end of the round, each friendly ship may increase the last yaw value of its current speed by 1 during its determined course step. I really like this one for hammerheads. But, if you have a hammerhead-based fleet, it's not particularly good for CR-90s, though, which is kind of why I don't necessarily think this is the best one, because, well, you can put it on a CR-90. So I feel like if you're going to run this one, you might be just better off running it on a Pelta and, and just running this one all the time and running a fleet that is going to take better advantage of it, especially certain ships that could use more mobility, like maybe a Liberty and some hammerheads and things like that. This one's a really good one for that. And it also, if you maybe were running somebody like Maydeen or, navigation heavy fleets, maybe now it opens up the door for you to take other commanders instead. So I like this card, but I'm not sure. I think it's a good option for a one-off, but I'm not sure it's the best. Let me navigate to the one I think is the best. I think Intensify Firepower could potentially be the best. I think it's definitely maybe the most fun way to do this. Again, to Intensify Firepower is a 6, so it's going to cost a little bit more, but it lets you, every time you're attacking a ship, and you can effectively do this twice if you can line up double arcs, and that's one of the things that I like so much about this. So, maybe if I were running this on a Liberator, I would want to equip some of my CR-90s with a card you don't often use, but maybe Enhanced Armament. Why Enhanced Armament? Well, a lot of times I would like to put a Turbo Laser Reroute Circuit on a CR-90, and all of a sudden now I'm thinking, well, maybe I don't have to do that because I'm going to have Intensify Firepower. I can now just, change the die. And, oh, by the way, I can use Intensify Firepower on multiple shots. There's so many times you are attacking at long range. You want to be able to mitigate those red dice, but a lot of opponents tend to have evade tokens. Not every opponent, but a lot of ships have evade tokens. And, well, there's been so many times I'm like, well, I would just rather have Intensify Firepower, for all of my ships than Turbo Laser Reroute Circuits, because, well, if you only get that one double, your opponent's going to spend the evade and kill the double anyway. So, you're not always getting that much more of a benefit from TRC. I love TRC, but here's a way where you can try to maybe make it, take maximum advantage of Intensify Firepower. Supposing you have a lot of CR-90s that are running Enhanced Armament. Why Enhanced Armament as opposed to Spinal or something like that? Well, I'm like, you're more likely to line up a double arc this way. The CR-90 is already very mobile, And you can get that side and front shot. Even if it's obstructed, you'll still get to do it. But having 2 red dice in the front and then 2 red dice on the left or right, depending on how you double arc, it's going to be really cool, because that means for every CR-90 that's set up like this, you're going to be able to use Intensify Firepower 2 times. And maybe you roll good, but generally you don't always roll that good. And if you're running a commander like Leia or something like that, and which could definitely work again if you're running lots and lots of ships, and this is a way for you to be able to stretch the fleet out into like maybe 7 or even 8 deployments, 8 activations, which is really, really cool. Yeah, it's fun. I don't recommend doing it all the time, but sometimes it's really fun to do, especially with being able to just drop Intensify Firepower. You're going to get 16 hits out of that, theoretically, if you were to double arc with everybody and you had at least maybe one unfavorable die that you wanted to change to a hit. So you can get up to like 16 hits that way if you're running like an 8-ship list. If you're running a bunch of CR-90s and maybe Hammerheads or something like that, you can totally do that. Or maybe just a whole bunch of CR-90s on them. But Hammerheads also, can be outfitted to really take good advantage of this. I often like to run Gunnery Team and Spinal Armament on Hammerheads, because now I've got 3 dice in the front and I can shoot 2 times out of that same front arc. They have a pretty decent front arc. Generally, you kind of want to take a slower approach to Hammerheads. Again, I did just finish saying that, hey, the Hammerheads work great with the different fleet command, and sure they do, because at speed 3 they don't have that last click, and that could potentially give them that click, which would be great. But in this case, we're gonna have 3 red dice rolling, maybe even 4 if we've concentrated fire, and at long range, you're gonna have a blank if you're rolling 3 or 4 red dice, especially if you're attacking twice. You're gonna have that. You might have one on each attack, so you can really take great advantage of that one time. And think, if you can deploy everybody and move them all together, and then get that alpha strike. All right, everybody's in shooting range now. Now's the time we want to pop it. Now is the time, because maybe the next turn they'll be dead. So you can potentially line up like this tremendous alpha strike. Even CR-95 combat retrofits. Imagine you're running somebody like this, right? How many times have you ever run one of these? Maybe not that many, because it's not the most common way to run a CR-75. But when you do, have you ever attacked somebody with that single blue die and rolled an accuracy? I mean, it's just like Intensify Firepower, perfect. Oh, and for the heck of it, let's put disposable capacitors on there, so now we can roll that blue die at long range. We know we're guaranteeing a hit, and that's cool, because death by 1,000 cuts is still death. So that's there's a lot of fun things you can do in making basically a CR-90 maybe your new flagship. I like it. I like the Liberator. I think it's a cool title. I think I'm glad that it's cheap, and I think you can have a lot of fun with it. Rebellion in the Rim is dropping very, very soon, and you'll be able to get your own copy. And I'll put some links over on the side for some of the other videos that I have done about this sort of stuff. I think I've talked about all of the new titles now, so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section. What do you guys think about them doing more card packs and these campaign type packs? I'm less interested in the campaign, more interested in all the new normal content that it's adding to the game as a whole, because I think that's really fun. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about it. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I also want to throw a big thanks to my patrons on Patreon. You guys are amazing and definitely help make this all possible. So I want to thank you all for your continued support. And as always, have a great day.